Welcome to the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses all the things that schools may have missed, with your hosts AJ Kuti and Jason Gordon. Hey everybody, welcome back. Welcome to the show. If you've never been here before, we are the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses the things that schools may not have prepared you for. I'm AJ, sitting across from me, holding it down. Jason, how you doing?
Doing great, AJ. Today is I get half the day off, so for the second half of the day, I'm going to a golf tournament.
Oh, that sounds awesome. I love golf.
Oh, yeah, and the weather's nice now, too. So, I'm not that big of a golf fan, to tell you the truth. I don't really play, and I almost never watch it. But this tournament comes to town every year, and the weather's amazing right now, so I'm going to go out there and enjoy it.
I wish I could be doing that, because after this, I'm still doing stuff for the doctoral program that I'm in now. So,
oh, congratulations.
Buddy, it is kicking my tail right now. So
hang in there, it'll be worth it.
Now, which leads me to another question. Let's just assume that we have this person that asks a question. They sent us in a question. Let's just call him TJ. And this person is in a doctoral program, let's say, maybe in for business. And they are trying to complete the program, according to what's been sent in. But they already have a job, so they don't have to worry about using the program to propel their job, to find another job. They're just using it to keep the same job because they really like what they do. How important would you say GPA is in this doctoral program for CJ or MJ or whatever his name was?
I would say D is for degree.
Hey, I like it.
I don't think it's very important grade-wise at all. I would say whatever you turn out in terms of your publication material, right? Mm-hmm. And whatever you're doing, whatever you're working towards and presenting at conferences and stuff, that's what's going to be important.
There you go. So there's the answer. I'll let this person know. Well, in today's episode, we are talking about student email etiquette and the tips and tricks. So this goes into our tips and tricks series. So we're going to be giving you a few tips and tricks here to help you become better at creating emails. And I know this may be something that you're thinking, well, this is really irrelevant. This is such maybe a small issue, but it is actually a fairly big issue among college students, at least from our perspective, at least from the professor's perspective.
It's huge. I mean, and I talk to employers all the time, so it's a real issue. Before we jump into it, though, let me remind everybody on the call to action. We got to, we need your questions. We need your input. We need your comments. So go to our website. That's reschool'd.com. That's Reschool'd with a D, not an ED. Right? Drop us a line. Let us know what's going on with you. Ask us questions. Tell us things you want to hear about. Also, check us out on our social media handles. That's Reschool'd Pod on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and also on your favorite podcasting apps. Make sure you get notifications when we drop new episodes. Follow us, that type of thing.
And if you like what you hear and you want to help us out, support us, please leave us that 5-star review. That would help us out tremendously as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, let's get into the quick question. And the quick question today is, what is your biggest pet peeve when it comes to students emailing you?
Well, I'm going to have to go general on this one, just the lack of etiquette. Mm. Today we're going to talk about etiquette. We're going to talk about how to use it effectively and, tips and tricks for just being effective with your email and making it an more important and more useful part of your life. But the lack of etiquette I see from students in emailing, and I've been party to emails between the student and their employer because I coordinate internships, and some of that lack of etiquette is still there, and it just creates a horrible impression. So that being said, definitely for me, can't stand to see it, all the things we're going to talk about in the etiquette section.
I think my answer would be the use of text jargon in the email to me. They use those, shorthand that they would use from text messages, because I guess that's what we're used to right now anyway. They use that in the email itself, which, again, I understand. And probably because a lot of the students are emailing me from their phone and it's just quicker. I get that. But I'm a middle-aged dad. I'm not lit. I don't know the lingo. And so some of these times I get stuff and I'm like, what does that mean? Like, I got to go to Urban Dictionary just to figure out what it means.
Oh, I got an email the other day where a student said, Professor Gordon, got your email addy from so-and-so. And I'm like, really? This is the way you start off a professional conversation about me helping you find an internship. You got my addy from somebody. So
that's a new one. I haven't heard that one yet.
Oh, really?
Uh-uh.
Oh, that's the one for today, man.
Oh.
That's you got to shorten everything down to just a quarter of the word and put Y on the end of it.
I feel like I got to do research every semester to figure out what new terms are coming up so I can become, a little bit more literate to the new lingo.
Yeah, we're not cool anymore.
Oh, we're definitely not cool.
Whoever's in high school getting ready to go to college listening to this are like, man, these guys are outdated.
My son is very, he's not shy to tell me I'm not hip. And, in our day, when somebody said they were lit, it means a whole lot different today than it was back then. So when he said he was lit, I was like, on what?
Yeah, that meant something different in our time.
So, well, let's get into this main topic. Let's get into this student email etiquette. And I'm just going to start with this basic question, which is probably on the minds of some of the listeners right now. And that is, why do we think bringing up etiquette from a student email perspective is important enough to be used for an entire show? I mean, it's something so small that we don't use all the time. It's really almost, we use it, professors use it to communicate when something needs to be communicated to the students, and then students usually communicate to the professor if they've been asked a question or if something's wrong or if they need something.
It's just the impact of it. It creates an impression of you, right? Sometimes it's your first impression. Sometimes it establishes a continued impression. But, when you don't have personal interaction with somebody and they can't get to know you more deeply, the only thing they have to judge is the communications you send to them. And when you send an email that presents you in one way, if that's accurate, well, fine. Okay, good. It may be a detriment to you, but okay, fine, good. But sometimes it presents you in a light far more negatively than you expect. So because of that, I think we have to address the whole etiquette aspect of it. Now, we'll throw in some tips and tricks there to make it just a more effective part of your life, but that's why etiquette's important.
Yeah, there's a difference between receiving an email from a student who is, like I said, just using shorthand. They almost look at it as a text, versus receiving what would be considered a professional email. And when I say professional email, I don't want you to write a book. Like, you don't have to write a novel when it comes to writing the email. It needs to be clear and concise. But there are certain information that needs to be included, and there are certain ways to communicate things that need to be communicated. And without those, it takes away, like you said, that first impression. Like, you start building this bias from many factors in class. I mean, the way that you present yourself in class, you're going to have an impression on the professor, the way you conduct yourself in class, just like you're going to have an impression on the professors in the way that you conduct yourself in communicating outside of class. So we think this is a really big area that needs to be focused in on.
Okay. Well, let's jump in there. Let's give them some stuff.
Well,
and before you want to start with etiquette, you want to start with tips, or what?
Well, before we do that, there's one point that I want to make when it comes to us going through the tips and tricks, and that is, we are specifically focusing in on student email, not necessarily business email, but student email, the communication between you and the professor or you and the admin. Now, when I say that, I also want you to know there's going to be some obvious overlapping between student email and business email. There's probably going to be a whole lot of overlapping, but a lot of the stuff that we're talking about is really in the context of the classroom in some sort. So obviously there are certain things we're going to say that might not be necessary for a business email. So keep that in mind as we go through these.
Good point. I mean, this is training for the future or the present even, but yeah, keep that in mind.
Which leads me to my first tip, because this is, again, specific to a student email. You wouldn't use this specific tip for a business because it doesn't, relate to business. But I would say my first tip is always include what class you're referring to in the email. That's a big one for me because we teach multiple classes. And when a student says, hey, I have a question, or I'm not going to be able to come to this class, or I missed this test, can I set up a makeup time? And all they give us is their name, but we don't know what class they're in. Especially at the beginning of the semester, we're still trying to learn your names. And we have a lot of students in each class. So rather than me having to get out a roll to figure out where your name is in what class, so I know what class you're referring to, if you go ahead and say, hey, I'm so-and-so in your 8 to 9:15 for me, managerial accounting class. If you go ahead and get that out for me, it takes the work out of me having to look to see what class you're in. And that helps me a lot.
Yeah, that's a pet peeve for me too as well. I mean, I've got 3 or 4 classes depending, and for students just to email me with their name, and sometimes they don't even include their full name, and then in their email address, I don't see their full name, or I see sometimes they go by their middle name, and we have a lot of Hispanic students who have 4 names, so the last name that shows up does not always indicate the student to me. So, yeah, I'm going to piggyback off of that one. Not only should you identify yourself, you should identify yourself in the title.
Yes.
And I recommend talking titles.
Okay. Explain.
Jason Gordon, Ed 101 dash need help with boom, right? That type of thing. Give as much information in a talking title. You don't need a whole long sentence, right? That doesn't show up. But something abbreviated, kind of the way you bullet things on your resume where you abbreviate things. I mean, that is extremely useful. I know exactly the purpose of it just when I go to check my email. And, we get dozens of emails a day, right? And we have to sort through them and triage the ones we address first. If I see something that's a talking title and I know what I need to do for it, it makes it a low-hanging fruit for addressing that immediately. So I'll go to that quickly. So if you want to get your question answered or the information you're requesting or whatever, do that. Use a talking title, identify yourself, make it easier for us to take action immediately so we don't have to do a whole lot of background work before we can respond.
Yeah, that's a big one. I usually tell my students, give me something in the subject, because a lot of times we as professors also get notifications on a phone that we have email, and then that gives us, more or less, that gives us the title, the subject line, and who it's from. And like you just said, we get so many emails over the course of a day. I mean, the other day I was in class for 3 hours, and we had already had 9 emails. And majority of them are spam emails coming from either publishers or coming from something that somebody's trying to sell us on, a product they're trying to sell us on, whatever. And I just want to know which ones is the most relevant for me at that time. So being able to see that, hey, this is from a student and this is a problem that they're having from a notification allows me to not just ignore it and hope that the notification goes away until I have some free time. I can actually get to it right away. So I think that's a very good point. That subject line is very important.
Yeah. All right, you want me to throw one out there?
Yeah, go ahead.
So students all the time have to attach things to the email, and they will say, I've attached a document for you, or I've attached this. Oftentimes we're checking it on our phone. It doesn't work as well. Sometimes the document doesn't pull up clearly type scenario. And just for speed and convenience and ease of, providing you the information or the response that you're looking for, if you're going to include an attachment, give a brief description of what it is or what it says so you can go from there, right? That was a big one I learned in the Army. They basically said if you ever sent an email with an attachment to a superior, never assume that the attachment will be opened.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that was a rule, especially the higher you went. It was understood. You send something to a colonel or a general officer, they will not open that attachment.
Wow.
It is not going to happen. So you need to have a talking title. You need to briefly, almost bullet pointed, explain what was the content of that attachment if it was important and you need a response for them, right? We use the bottom line up front approach. You always at the beginning of that email put that bottom line up front, right? And then after that, right? And when I say bottom line, the bottom line of the email, what are you asking for? What do you need? And then you provide the information afterwards.
Very cool. I've never heard that. That's really interesting.
Oh, yeah. That is standard operating procedure. They give you templates of emails with nothing but name, title, date. Here's how it should look, signature block, but bottom line up front, that is the bluff, right? That you put right there before you start typing anything else other than the salutation.
Wow. That is a really good tip because I'd never thought of that one. Yeah.
All right. Back at you.
All right. So I titled this one For the Love of All Things Holy because this is probably the absolute biggest pet peeve. And this is not simply from students. And actually, this probably doesn't occur if I look at it, this doesn't occur as much from students as it occurs from other professors too, but students can have this as well. If you receive an email, a class email, so a bunch of you are on this class email from the professor and they were asking for your input specifically or your answer to this question specifically, please hit reply and not reply all. When you reply, make sure you reply to the person that is sending the initial email, not to everyone else in the class, because if you do that, everyone else in the class, if they do that as well, you, the replier, are going to still have 23, 24 other emails that mean nothing to you because you don't care about the answer because you were just answering the professor's question. So it saves a ton of stress and anxiety when you get 24 notifications from something that you don't even need to know. And it just makes life a little bit easier for you as the student as well as the other students in your class. So make sure you reply rather than reply all.
And be careful with that reply all button if you're going to say things that you don't want somebody else to hear.
Yes. And make sure. So, and this brings up another point too. Whatever you're using for your email platform, some of them have a default if there's more than one receiver, that reply all is the default. And you actually have to manually go in there and change it to reply. And some of them, the reply is the default. So you just need to know what platform default is set for.
Yeah, good point there. More people have gotten fired misusing that reply all button than you would imagine, right? Because they say something negative and it gets back to the wrong person.
Well, I would say, so I will say this just to add on to yours, just don't say anything negative to email. That's a paper trail that you don't want.
Exactly. I tell my students, I used to teach a communications course, and tell my students, follow that, and this is ironic that the person who coined it or said it was Elliot Spitzer. And if you follow what happened with him, he got in trouble for being documented as using the services, an escort service regularly, right? But when he was U.S. District Attorney for the Eastern District of New York, he said, never write anything in an email that you would care if it were published on the front page of the newspaper.
Yep, that's true.
Right? So basically make it innocuous, put things only out there that you wouldn't care if the world knew about it.
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to jump to a different one. Well, back to what we started with, the idea of not using lingo and using complete sentences, using proper grammar, things like that. A tip for you is to activate something like Grammarly or some other grammar sentence structure check software on your emails so that you're writing proper emails, right? You're writing complete sentences. You have subject-verb agreement, things like that. Because once again, that's an impression that you're creating about yourself. If we as professors see that you can't write an effective email, it changes our perception of you and what work you're capable of, right? We try not to, and we try to give, the benefit of the doubt, but when we read something that comes across as that unprofessional, we realize that the student has a long way to go before they're professionally ready for the workforce, right? So anyway, that's a big one for me.
Which it was my third one, was talking about spelling and grammar. Because it does create this negative kind of bias in our heads that is just unnecessary. You don't want to go ahead and put that out there for a professor to kind of have that impact on a professor's perception of you. It's just unnecessary. So go ahead and make sure that your spelling and grammar are correct. Which leads me really to my next one, and I'm interested to I don't know if this is just a personal one and you feel differently about it. I would love to get your opinion on this one. But I have always been taught when you communicate, when you're writing, whether you're typing it out or whatever, and you're writing a letter or an email or whatever, it is important that you write as if you were speaking. And by that I mean, don't be afraid to use contractions. So instead of saying I am, you can put I''M because it's easier to read. the flow of reading doesn't get caught up because that isn't how we naturally talk. And if you're reading how you naturally talk, then it becomes easier to read over time. Like you don't get caught up in things. You don't get caught up in how things sound and have to reread things and such. So I'm a big believer of using those contractions because that's how we speak, and it makes the flow of reading easier.
I would echo that, and that's the difference between a formal letter, right, and an email, right? That is the level of formality, pretty much, that changes. You still need appropriate grammar. You still need the appropriate salutation, right, Mr. or Miss, that type of thing. But maybe even that changes a little bit based upon your familiarity, right? I do always recommend following up with a salutation, right? That is professor, comma, and then start, right? That type of thing. Don't just go in with a flat response generally. So even when it's a reply to email, I still encourage that. But yeah, I agree. You can still use those salutations. You'll still proofread it and everything like that to make it sure it's grammatically correct. It'll just take on a slightly less formal tone because of that. So if you need something, like if it's a very professional communication, like you have something extremely important, like a request for a letter of recommendation from your professor or something of that nature, in that case, you go with a more formal tone and not use them. The one thing I'll say, be careful with about that aspect of how we talk, be careful with your pronouns, meaning that just using I, me, he, she type scenario rather than using the person's name. If you have multiple parties that you're describing in the scenario, that can cause the reader to get lost.
Yes.
Meaning, are we talking about this he or that he?
Yep.
Right? Which guy are we talking about here? That type of thing. And I see that all the time. Students are trying to explain a scenario to me, and they just keep saying he or she the whole time, but there are multiple parties that they're talking about, and I have no idea who they're addressing. And it makes sense in the student's head, but it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Right? And I have to clarify. And that's what you want to avoid. You want to make sure your emails are readily understood and look professional. And if you aren't careful, that overly familiar tone will get you in trouble.
So I want to ask you a question about your salutation. I want to get your opinion on this. Maybe it'll help the listeners out. So let's say I'm a student and you're the professor, and I email you and I say, Professor Gordon, blah, 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 blah. And then you reply back to me to say, dear so-and-so, here's my answer. And I reply back to you, and we kind of have this back and forth going. Is there ever a point in time in a link of emails to where the salutation is unnecessary? So like, is it the reply that you don't necessarily have to put Professor Gordon every single time that you reply?
Yeah, I would say if you know it's going to be a rapid succession of emails, that immediately we're going to go back and forth and use it almost as a text message, because the response is going to be sharp and to the point, that type of thing. That's when you would drop the salutation.
Okay.
Right. But if you're going to be addressing multiple points, and it's going to be scenario where you sit down and think about the email and you address the points, craft the letter, send it, and expect an equally thoughtful response. In that scenario, once again, I say keep the salutation.
Okay. Yeah, I've always wondered about that in terms of the how it feels when you drop the citation. Is there a point where you can just say, okay, we've gone through this enough, we don't have to keep saying professor or Mr. or doctor or whatever?
Well, once again, it's going to come down again to the purpose of the email.
All right, well, give us another one.
Okay, so I'm going to jump out of the pure etiquette aspect again and just say this is a cautionary tale. Watch your tone in an email. So we don't realize how easy it is to misinterpret words versus how you interpret something when somebody says it to you. Okay, so if you use things like voice translate and stuff like that, or voice transcription to write your emails and stuff, if you read that email separately afterwards, you'll see sometimes there'll be a question as to, is this person being snide, or are they making fun of the situation? Is it a joke, or what is their tone, their attitude? So it is so easy to misinterpret that. So be careful about that. Read your email multiple times and try to picture how the other person will receive the information. So if you're going to make a joke or you're going to make something that could come across as demanding or, crass, deal with that, right? Change the email. So I guess my tip there is watch your tone in the email because it can so easily be misinterpreted.
Have you ever heard of RBF? Or maybe RAF to some people? Resting angry face?
Oh, yeah.
Or
yeah.
I'm not going to say what the B was, but resting. I almost see some people when they write emails, they have resting angry emails. Like they just, I know they don't mean to, but it just comes off very almost curt. Mm-hmm. And you definitely want to be aware of that as you go through because it can come off in different ways. And that's the problem with written communication is there's no feeling behind it. We have to interpret how you feel. And we could interpret it incorrectly. So that's a great point.
Yeah. I mean, if you've ever taken a communications course in high school or you've taken one in college already or something like that, you know that communications, right, have to be interpreted by the recipient, right? It's kind of like you're downloading it and analyzing it in your brain. And if you don't have those secondary cues like somebody's facial expressions, somebody's tone of voice, the volume of their voice, things like that, one of the biggest issues I see there is people misusing capital letters, underlining things, all cap words. All cap word is like yelling at somebody, yep. Right? Using an exclamation point, people put 1, 2, and 3 exclamation points. Well, that's like yelling at someone, right? And it's interpreted that way. But you may not mean it that way because I see it all the time in text messages where it's just, to show excitement or something like that, right? So just be careful about those things, right? Interpretation is subject to the beholder.
Well, I got one more, and I would say check your email regularly. That is a huge one, and especially if you have already emailed somebody requesting something. I've had students email me and say, "Hey, I missed this exam or I missed this assignment. Am I able to do a makeup exam?" And I get it fairly quickly, and so I immediately email them back to say, okay, here's the times you can make up, because some of the stuff is time sensitive. And I'll email them back 5 minutes after they emailed me. And we're talking midday. And then I won't get a response back until midday of the next day, which is past the time that I may have suggested in the original email, my reply. And
that happens to me all the time.
It is frustrating to me that especially if you're requesting something, keep a checkup to make sure that this person hasn't emailed you back, because you're requesting something and they could be giving you the option to do something, but it's time sensitive.
I recommend checking your email at least twice a day, at the beginning of the school day and at the end of the school day, but preferably at least 3 times a day, once in the middle as well, just for that single occurrence.
Yeah, and I would caveat that.
Need something in short order.
I would caveat that as unless you're requesting something. Like unless you specifically requested something. And in that case, I would check it more than that.
Yeah, keep checking back specifically for that email. Yeah. And here's one trick on that. Make certain that if you have multiple email addresses, okay, forward those multiple emails, those, inbox receipts, right? Forward them to a singular email address that you check all the time. Now, Gmail, for example, makes it easy. So if you forward other email addresses, you can actually reply from that email account, and it will send it from the email address that was the original recipient. So say, for example, I have a Microsoft email address, a school email address. I have an
AOL email address at
AOL, Yahoo, whatever. I don't even know what exists out there anymore.
Hotmail.
But I have all of those, and I have them combined into my Gmail. If I reply to an email that was forwarded from my AOL account, it will reply from my AOL account. So it keeps the email addresses consistent, right? Just that functionality makes it so easy to use a single email inbox.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I'm going to have to look into that.
Make your life a lot easier. I think a lot of people forward or combine their emails within say email service provider like Apple,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have
Yep.
a single mailbox that you set up and you add other email accounts to it, right? And then you can combine those.
Yep.
So that's another useful way, particularly if you're checking your email from your phone regularly, right?
Wow, that's a really good. I did not know that. I need to look into that.
Yeah. So, do you have another one for us, AJ, or you want me to throw another one out?
You throw another one out.
Okay, here's one that this is a professional practice that you will take on when you enter the workforce, but starting to do it in school will help make your life way simpler. Use your folders, right, over on to the left of whatever email service you use, whether it's Gmail, whether it's Microsoft, whatever. They give you places to store older emails. Move emails into folders that are appropriately labeled, right? And then star or flag important emails so that they come to the top, right? That type of thing. So you get reminders. Gmail's got this great thing that you can set reminders for yourself to make certain that by this time you've at least responded to this, right? So it'll take old emails and move them back up to the top.
I will admit I am the absolute world's worst at that. I'm terrible at it. I remember at one point, I think it was a couple years ago, and since then I've deleted a lot of emails. But I think I had over 12,000 emails in my inbox and I think it has a lot to do with my lack of discipline and organization, and not just, I don't feel comfortable enough that I'm actually going to do a good job in it. So I just don't do it at all. And I just have them stuck there. And if I need something, then I just go to the search function and type it in and hope for the best. And I'm even looking at my emails right now, and I've got over 5,000 emails in my inbox right now, and they all date from, let's see, the last 2009, January of 2019, and they're all just sitting there. So I am the world's worst at that, and I wish somebody could just say, okay, this is how you do it. And I know it's something very trivial, but at the same time, when you have somebody who struggles with organization, and has always struggled with organization, it's just one of those things that takes time to learn, and I have not put that time as a priority, and I need to.
Yeah, see there, folks. We ourselves need to practice what we preach. I'm a little bit better. I keep mine fairly organized. I routinely get down to 0 emails, and so my work email right now, I think I have 5 emails sitting in it from today, and my personal email. A lot of them are saved things, right? And I just keep them there for reflective view. But of recent emails, I've got about 10. As
somebody who has always prided myself on that strategy, is kind of that brand that I've been on this podcast. That is the one area I think I have not used strategy very well in, because there are certain things within the email provider that you can use to automate things. You can use filters, and you can use different sorting functions, and different create different functions to do different things. So if then that kind of thing, and that is the one area I don't think I've ever used that for. I just haven't taken the time, because I guess I've associated it with not necessarily needing to take the time, because it's just easy just to delete what I don't need and read what I do need. But that may be somewhere in the very near future that I'm going to take some time, just spend some time to create all this stuff to automate it, to make it easier.
Yeah, those automatic templates are great. I have to reply with the same email to a lot of people, particularly for internships and things like that. So using a couple of templates is a huge time saver, adds efficiency, gets the conversation going, that type of thing. And then certainly if you have these ongoing conversations with individual students, right, you creating those folders, slide them in there so you can track the prior conversation easily.
Well, that is all the tips and tricks for the list that we have, but I do have some rapid questions maybe that you can answer real quick, just to kind of see where you're at. I want to see kind of what your opinion are on these kind of things. So one is, what about the auto reply? Like if you're not there and you just, do you feel it's important that if maybe you're on vacation, is it important to set the auto reply to say, hey, I'm not available to answer right now, but as soon as I get back on this date, I will be sure to reply back to your email?
Yes, and for one reason. That is a pro-level move.
Okay. You
look like you have your stuff together. You look like a true professional when you do something like that.
All right, so I wrote that down on my notes,
particularly as a student. So yes, I've got to do that.
I've wrote that down on my notes to do list, so I need to start doing that. What about What about like if you're trying to set up a time to meet with somebody or some kind of appointment or something like that? Do you think it is good to just say, hey, what are some times that you need, or what do you think about this time? Or do you think it's good to just send them a calendar invite? Because a lot of these things allow you to integrate calendar invites into the email.
So COVID, particularly in school, right, and we're still in the middle of this pandemic, has made this more essential than ever, right? The ability to, one, schedule meetings virtually, right, using video teleconference within your email is so important. So integrating your calendar with your email, using them both so that if somebody's going to send you an email and you want to say, all right, let's schedule a date, you can just share your calendar with them, right? Or they can send you an easy calendar invite that you accept and it goes to your calendar, and there you go. So checking your calendar on your phone, integrating your calendar with your email, so that that is a usable tool for you, right? It will make your interactions with third parties. And like I say, I use it all the time now, right? If a student wants to talk to me, I immediately send them a calendar invite with a video teleconference link, because many of the students are taking classes virtually these days. They're certainly on campus far less than they were prior to COVID. So it makes it harder to arrange meetings. Well, that function has made it easier than ever, but it makes it hard again. It makes it laborious, right? If I have to take the time to, explain to you how this works, or, you don't have a calendar that I can simply send you a video teleconference invite.
All right. What about really quickly, the importance of a signature?
Signature? That's one of those that just looks professional again. I wouldn't say that one's essential.
Okay.
I do recommend that you put your accolades and things like that, your full name and your phone number, contact information, that type of thing below, right? Again, it's just pro-level move. You look like you have your stuff together.
Well, and when I said signature, I didn't mean like physically written signature. I'm talking about exactly what you say, but it's, it says signature 1 for a lot of these things where you create it and it just automatically populates your name, your credentials, your address. And that way you don't have to type it every single time. It just is automatically there.
That's huge. Particularly putting things like your phone number in there so you can be easily contacted, right? Your full name. And if you've got a difficult pronunciation of your name, put the phonetic pronunciation. You see a lot of people put the he, she, her, at the pronouns type thing. If that's important to you, particularly, identify the correct pronouns for addressing. If you have a professional salutation, professor, doctor, whatever, right, that you want to include in there, that's good as well.
All right, one last one. The importance of using the correct email when it comes to correspondence. And by that, I mean, as a professor getting an email from a student, is it better to get the email from the student's school email, or just a Gmail email, or an AOL email, or, those kind of things?
Well, federal law says, we cannot reply to students with any form of personally identifying information, which is hard to keep out if you're addressing something about class, that you have to do it from your school account. So always, always, always use your school account. Don't send personal email messages. One, you're just going to get a reply back from the professor that, hey, I can't correspond with you on this email. Send me one from your normal email. We can't search for your name and contact information as easily. It makes it difficult for us to keep up with the conversation if you do it between multiple email addresses. So that's, once again, forwarding things to a single inbox can help with that. Right. And then making certain you're creating the email from the appropriate email account is huge. And I'll tell you this, that translates into the business world as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that too.
You don't want to come across as unprofessional.
Yeah, I would say maybe this is a close second tip. This is one of the honorable mentions, but make sure you have a professional email, like the beginning. So like, your name, first name dot last name, or first initial last name, or something that has your name and not like, Sexy Drexy, blah, 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 at, this, or goo at yahoo.com, or something like that. You don't want that for a professional email to communicate from. So make sure you have at least a specific professional email. And if you want to have a fun one for friends or what you had, because I still have a stupid one when I was back in high school. I mean, it is awful, but I still have it and I use it as my junk mail. Like anytime somebody says, what's your email to sign up for this? That's usually the ones I give because I never check it. And so make sure you have that one as a professional. You don't want something that's going to be seen as unprofessional.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen that many times, particularly in the Army when I had, I was a military attorney, and for a while there, I was in legal assistance. So I had, individual soldiers and family members who I was doing legal services for, and I'd have to correspond with them. And some of the emails you would not believe. It was so unprofessional. It was ridiculous. And, I gave the same advice to all of them. So I give the same advice to students, right? And I get it that you're probably not going to be sending professional email and correspondence from your private email in the school context, but this translates to the business environment, right? And I will tell you this, when you're sending out emails outside of the internal school system, out not just to professors, but to outside, say, for example, you're applying to internships and things like that, it helps for the email to come from a .edu, from your school's email address.
Agreed.
Third parties are way more willing to respond to a student who's asking for information or assistance or things like that than they are from just Joe Schmo on the street with a regular personal email that is asking for information or assistance or help. There's just something about this social contract if people are willing to not pay it forward, right? Sure. Pay it backwards, I guess, in that scenario because, they're responding to the student who needs help because hopefully somebody did that for them along when they were coming along.
I will say pro-parent move, when you have kids, if you have kids, go ahead and get them a professional email because the more and more, obviously, kids come around or people come up to start getting their emails, the less likely you're going to be able to find the email that you want. And so you can just, as they're growing up, I have all of my kids' professional emails, just their name. And so it's just something to help them move forward so they have that email. And they can make whatever email they want on the side, but they have that professional one to keep.
Very smart.
Would you have any other things that we need to bring up before we head out?
Well, I just want to, once again, remind everybody that, we want input from you. Okay? So topics like this, there are a million things that we could say about email. Overarching thing is make it easy for other people and create a positive impression for yourself. There you go. That's it.
Awesome. This has been a really fun show. It's been an interesting one. And I even learned some stuff that I need to go back and now fix. So I really appreciate that. It gives me more work I got to do. Thank you.
There you go.
Well, that's all we have. Hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, hope to see you then. Goodbye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Reschool'd podcast. Be sure to head over to reschool'd.com for news and other information on things we're getting into.